Some of the most dangerous foods in your kitchen are not raw, not expired, and not what you think. They're sitting in your fridge right now, cooked, cooled, waiting. And the moment you reheat them, something changes at a microscopic level that most people never see, but your body absolutely feels. Now here's the part that should concern you after 50. It's not just about food safety anymore. It's about how your body handles damage and how much of it quietly accumulates over time. I'm Dr. Richard, and today I'm going to walk you through 5 common foods you should be very careful reheating. Not because of fear, but because of what actually happens inside your cells when you do. And one of these foods is eaten almost every single day by millions of people who believe it's completely harmless. Let me clarify something first, because this is where most videos get it wrong. Reheating food does not directly cause cancer, but what it can do, under the right conditions, is create compounds and toxins that increase oxidative stress and chronic inflammation, 2 of the most important biological drivers of aging and disease. And after the age of 50, your body becomes less efficient at handling both. Your detox systems slow down. Your cells repair damage more slowly, and your baseline level of inflammation quietly rises. So the same mistake that your body could tolerate at 30 may have very different consequences at 60. But here's what most people never get told. It's not just the food. It's what happens to that food the second time it's heated. Let's start with the most underestimated one on this list. Rice. It looks harmless, simple, clean, safe. But rice carries something called Bacillus cereus, a type of bacteria that can survive the cooking process. Now here's where the real problem begins. If cooked rice is left sitting at room temperature, even for a few hours, this bacteria can multiply and produce toxins. And those toxins are heat resistant. That means when you reheat the rice, the bacteria may die, but the toxins remain. Inside your body, those toxins can irritate the gut lining, trigger inflammation, and in some cases lead to food poisoning. But even when symptoms are mild, there's something deeper happening. Your immune system activates, inflammatory signals increase, and your gut, which is already more sensitive with age, takes the hit. The solution is simple but critical. Cool rice quickly. Refrigerate it within 1 to 2 hours, and never reheat it more than once. Now the second food seems similar, but the implications go a bit deeper. Potatoes, especially cooked potatoes that are left out, then reheated. Like rice, potatoes can also support the growth of harmful bacteria if improperly stored. But there's another layer here. When potatoes cool, their starch structure changes into something called resistant starch, which can actually be beneficial for gut health. But when they're reheated improperly, especially multiple times, that structure begins to break down again. And what you're left with is something harder to digest, more irritating to the gut, and more likely to trigger bloating, discomfort, and low-grade inflammation. And this is where it becomes more relevant after 50, because your digestive system is no longer as resilient. Enzyme production declines, gut microbiome balance shifts, and small irritations become bigger signals. So again, it's not about fear. It's about understanding that the same food can behave very differently depending on how it's handled. Now let's move into something most people think is perfectly safe to reheat. Chicken. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. Chicken is rich in protein, and protein is built from amino acids arranged in very specific structures. When you cook chicken the first time, those proteins denature, meaning they unfold. That's normal. But when you reheat chicken, especially unevenly or at high temperatures, those proteins can break down further into compounds that are harder to digest. This doesn't make the chicken toxic in the traditional sense, but it does make it more stressful for your digestive system. And here's why that matters more than people think. poor protein digestion leads to increased gut irritation, more fermentation in the intestines, and greater inflammatory signaling. Over time, this contributes to what many people describe as unexplained bloating, fatigue after meals, or a general feeling that certain foods don't sit right anymore. And often, it's not the food itself, it's what happened to it during reheating. But now we're stepping into something much more serious. Because the next category doesn't just affect digestion, it affects your cells directly. Oils and fried foods. This is where things begin to escalate. When oils are heated, especially at high temperatures, their molecular structure changes. They begin to form oxidized lipids and compounds called aldehydes. You can think of these as damaged fats. Now here's the problem. When you reheat those oils, especially repeatedly, you increase the concentration of these damaged compounds. And once they enter your body, they don't just pass through. They interact with your cells. They damage cell membranes. They disrupt mitochondria, the energy centers of your cells. And they increase oxidative stress, essentially a form of internal rusting. And after 50, this matters more than ever. Because mitochondrial function is already declining. Energy production drops. Fatigue increases. Recovery slows down, and adding oxidized fats into that system is like pouring fuel on a slow-burning fire. This is why repeatedly reheating fried foods or reusing cooking oil is one of the most overlooked drivers of long-term cellular stress. But what comes next is the most important part of this entire conversation. Because this is where reheating moves from short-term irritation to long-term risk. Processed meats. Foods like sausages, deli meats, bacon. These often contain preservatives called nitrates and nitrites. On their own, these compounds are relatively stable. But when exposed to high heat, especially during reheating, they can transform into nitrosamines. And nitrosamines have been studied extensively. They are compounds that have been associated with increased cancer risk in multiple lines of research, particularly when exposure is frequent and long-term. Now let me be very clear. Eating reheated processed meat once does not cause cancer. But repeated exposure over years, combined with other lifestyle factors, can contribute to a biological environment where DNA damage accumulates. Inflammation remains elevated, and normal cellular repair becomes less efficient. And this is where everything connects, because earlier we talked about oxidative stress, inflammation, slower repair with age. This is the point where all of those pathways converge. This is why this particular category carries the most weight, not because it's immediately dangerous, but because it quietly adds to risk over time. So what should you actually do with all of this? Because the goal here is not to create fear around food. It's to give you control. Here's the practical takeaway that makes everything we discussed come together. First, avoid reheating food more than once. Each heating cycle compounds damage, nutritionally and chemically. Second, cool food quickly and refrigerate it within 1 to 2 hours. This alone dramatically reduces bacterial toxin risk. Third, avoid reheating oils or fried foods repeatedly. If it's been fried once, it should not be reheated again at high heat. Fourth, be mindful with processed meats. Occasional consumption is one thing. Repeated reheating, especially at high temperatures, is where the concern increases. And finally, listen to your body. After 50, your body gives clearer signals. If a reheated meal consistently leaves you feeling heavy, bloated, fatigued, that's not random, that's feedback. Because at the end of the day, it's not just what you eat, it's what happens to that food after it's cooked, after it's stored, and after it's heated again. That's the part most people overlook. And that's where small daily habits, turn into long-term biological effects. I'm Dr. Richard. If this opened your eyes even a little, I want to ask you something simple. Which of these foods surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. I read them. And if you want more clear, science-backed insights like this, explained in a way that actually makes sense for your body after 50, make sure you subscribe and stay with us. Because your health is not just about big changes. It's about understanding the small things that most people miss.